My name is Spencer Cox, Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Utah, and my role with intergenerational poverty came about kind of fortuitously. One day, I had the director of the Department of Workforce Services and a senator who was involved in kind of getting this started come into my office and sit down and talk to me about intergenerational poverty and explain to me what they had found and discovered. I had some unanswered questions that I could never really figure out with politics and poverty and how it all worked together. And suddenly there were a couple people that were answering my questions in ways that nobody else could. And that's when I realized I needed to get involved. And so they asked me at that time if I would serve as the co-chair of the Intergenerational Poverty Commission here in the state. And we've been off and running. What I didn't understand and what we learned through all of this is that there are two types of poverty, and that's something I didn't know. There's situational poverty. Life's good, things are going along, and then something bad happens. You get divorced, you have a health problem, you lose your job, suddenly you find yourself in poverty. You get some public assistance, you're on for a little while, you get back on your feet, you're out, you're good to go. But then there's another cohort of people, and those are people who have been on welfare, on public assistance, in poverty now for generations. And you start to look out and you see how much we're spending as a state and as a nation, and you realize that we can't sustain this. As those numbers continue to mushroom and grow, we have to do something differently. And when you look at those poverty levels, we haven't done a good job of reducing the poverty level. But the one thing we do is we can bring people together. So I like to see us as the lead of forming these teams, of helping bring collaboration together. If the governor says, you know, I'm going to hold a meeting in Iron County or Sevier County, people show up, and that's important. And what we found throughout this process is we're convening these groups together. We have people who live in the same communities, who are working with the same families, who are trying to do often the same things, although maybe on a different track, who have never been in a room together before. And when we put them in there, they start talking and they start realizing that there are synergies that could happen. We're really focusing on 4 different areas. So one is early childhood development, and we found it's critical for young children, pre-kindergarten children, to make sure that they're developing in appropriate ways, that they're getting the early childhood education that they need so that they're ready for kindergarten when they go. The second piece of this is education. Everyone agrees that education is the way out of poverty. So we have to help families get more education. The third is health. Healthcare matters to people. If you're worried about your health, your illness, your sickness, you can't take care of your kids, you're not going to be focusing on getting jobs, on education. Those things become secondary if we're not able to provide for the health needs of the family. And then the last one is that work piece, or that economic piece for the family, helping them get what they need to get back on their feet and to get themselves out of poverty. That's why the governor announced in his State of the State address this year an initiative to focus over the next 4 years specifically on economic development in rural Utah. We can't tell people, hey, you got to go out and get a job when there are no jobs to get. That is an issue. And so we're working with employers on the Wasatch Front. We're working with government agencies on the Wasatch Front as well, looking for opportunities to expand into rural Utah. And we're also working with existing businesses in rural Utah to help find new markets for their goods and services, to help them expand their operations, and to make sure that we're finding jobs, because this doesn't work if there aren't any jobs to be had. And we've met with the Manufacturers Association, we've met with several others who are struggling right now to hire people because unemployment is so low on the Wasatch Front. We have more jobs than we have people right now on the Wasatch Front. And sitting down with them and saying, look, we have more people than jobs off the Wasatch Front, and there's more out there than you think. So by taking these groups out to rural Utah, they're starting to realize that, hey, there's some infrastructure out here. I could expand my business. I'm struggling to expand on the Wasatch Front. I could expand into Price, or I could expand into Vernal, or I could expand into Cedar City, other places throughout Utah, and there's a workforce there, and I could actually, land's cheaper. power's cheap. I could do that. It's good for my bottom line, and it's good for the state. And as a state, we're doing that as well. We're looking at many of the jobs we have in the state of Utah, our different agencies, and having them ask the question, does this job have to be on the Wasatch Front? Now, that doesn't mean we're laying people off, but as those jobs expand or are changing, can we move some of those jobs into rural Utah? And we're starting to see some success there. We started out with, I think it's now up to 13, the 13 counties with the most vulnerable intergenerational poverty populations. And so what they do now is they have a task force of some sort. They've all formed these groups, and they meet monthly. And what they do in those monthly meetings, they're coordinating meetings. And so they've started out by just kind of planning, talking, figuring out what everybody else is doing, looking for gaps, seeing if there's some gaps where there isn't help and they need it. Also looking for overlap. Often we have different agencies within the same government, or again, nonprofits or others, who are doing things. Some of them are doing it better than others, and saying, okay, look, you're doing this. We could do something else with our funds. Let's fill in a gap here. So that was the first phase of the coordination. But the next phase is exactly that, actually setting up lines of communication between those different agencies and groups to work with individual families. And we really think that that's going to make a huge difference. So 10 years from now, what I hope is that we have provided opportunities for kids that didn't have those opportunities before. We've helped their parents find ways to make an income and get off of public assistance. And then these kids are having families of their own, and they're participating in the American dream. They're finding themselves better off than their parents and grandparents. And we feel confident that if we work together, and we don't care about who gets the credit, that we will make a difference, and we'll see a real change in the lives of real people.